He said, "We just need someone who fits the new culture." My coffee went cold before my tears did. That was the morning I realized culture was just another word for younger. My name's Helen, 45 years old, and this is the story of how they replaced me with a trainee and how I ended up training her boss the very next year. You ever been so angry that your silence felt louder than a scream? That's what it was like that day. I was sitting in a glass conference room that smelled like lemon polish and pretense. Outside the window, the city buzzed with life. Buses groaning, heels clicking, someone laughing on the phone. Inside, my career was being folded like a napkin and put away. "Nothing personal," said Darren, my manager, the kind of man who believed smiles counted as leadership. "We just need to modernize the department." Modernize. I'd modernized that whole place. I built their systems, trained every assistant, even rewrote the onboarding manual they were now using to onboard her. "She's hungry," he said, meaning 20-something, fresh out of business school, half my salary and none of my scars. I wanted to say, "So was I, until you fed on it." But I just nodded, because that's what women like me learn to do, nod through disrespect. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, lights low, a single candle flickering. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. My daughter Ari texted from her dorm, "You okay, Ma?" I typed back, "Yeah, just tired." But tired didn't cover it. Tired was a surface word. I was hollow. 20 years at that company, and I was suddenly invisible. I poured myself a glass of wine, stared at my reflection in the window. A woman who looked like she'd finally run out of grace. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took the bus, not because I had to, but because I needed to remember the grind. The air smelled like rain and engine oil, the kind of mix that reminds you life keeps moving whether you do or not. An older woman sat across from me, Bible in her lap. She caught my eye and smiled. "You look like you just got promoted by God," she said. I laughed for the first time in days. Feels more like I got laid off by him. She chuckled, shook her head. "Baby, sometimes he removes people so you can move higher." I didn't know it yet, but that stranger just preached my whole next year. 3 weeks later, my severance hit. They gave me a corporate-branded tote bag and a check that couldn't buy back the dignity they'd stripped. I told myself I'd take a month off, maybe 2, rest, reset. But rest feels foreign when your whole worth has been measured in productivity. So I started showing up at a little cafe on 4th Street, laptop open, pretending to be busy. The barista, Miles, knew my order before I said it. Vanilla latte, 2 pumps, oat milk, and a side of purpose. He'd tease. I laughed, but behind the smile was panic. Who was I without the office? Without the morning emails, the meetings, the sense of being needed? Then one day, scrolling LinkedIn like it was a dating app for self-esteem, I saw it. Now hiring operations consultant, Harper and Knox Logistics. Harper and Knox, a mid-sized firm in the same industry, one I'd once pitched to partner with us. They'd turned us down because we weren't agile enough. Funny thing was, the job description read like the manual I'd written. I applied, not because I thought I'd get it, but because I needed to remind myself I could. 3 days later, I got a call. "Ms. Harper, we'd love to schedule an interview." I smiled so hard my face hurt. The interview felt like déjà vu. Same conference room smell, same polite laughter, same half-smiling executives. Except this time, I wasn't desperate to prove my worth. I'd already seen what happens when you hand your value over to people who measure it in birthdays. "So, tell us about your leadership style," asked the director, Marianne, sleek hair and sharper tone. "I believe in legacy systems," I said. She frowned. "You mean outdated ones?" I smiled. "No, I mean systems built on wisdom, something you can't download from a podcast." She stared for a second, then laughed. Fair point. 2 weeks later, I was hired. As a consultant, not an employee, which meant my rate was higher than any salary they'd ever paid me before. Ari called that night. "Ma, that's huge. You said consultant like it's not CEO energy." I laughed. "Baby, I just need to pay the bills." But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was my comeback in disguise. My first day on the new job, I walked into a boardroom full of faces half my age, and at the end of the table, Tara, the girl they replaced me with. Now she was one of their new hires, part of a young leadership cohort. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Ms. Harper," she said, standing halfway up. "Consultant Harper," I corrected with a smile. She nodded, cheeks pink. The project I was assigned to? Restructuring their training department. The irony was delicious. For weeks I came in, observed, and listened. I kept my tone measured, my advice calm, my smile unshakable. They thought I was being polite. I was actually taking notes for my empire. One afternoon, the VP, Mr. Langston, leaned over and said, "We're planning to expand. Would you be interested in leading the rollout?" I nearly dropped my pen. "Lead it?" He nodded. "You've got a presence the younger team lacks. They trust you." Presence. That word used to be too emotional. Now it was leadership. Funny how power changes the dictionary. Around that same time, Darren, the man who'd let me go, popped up on my LinkedIn. He'd been promoted to regional director, and Harper and Knox had just signed a joint venture deal with his company, which meant within 6 months he'd be sitting across a conference table from me again. I couldn't help but smile. 6 months later, the day came. Joint strategy meeting. I walked into the main conference hall, heels clicking on marble, and there he was. Same smirk, same arrogance, just a few more gray hairs. He didn't recognize me at first, until I took the seat at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," I said. "I'm Helen Harper, senior consultant overseeing this integration." The look on his face could have powered the building. He cleared his throat, stammered, "Helen, I didn't realize—" "I know," I said softly. "You didn't." The room went silent. Even the projector paused like it wanted to watch. After the meeting, Tara found me in the hallway. Sorry, Consultant Harper," she said, smiling nervously. "I just wanted to say, I think about what you told me during training sometimes." I raised a brow. What did I say? That the best revenge is excellence. She laughed softly. "Guess you proved it." I smiled. Guess we did. Because I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her. Not even at him. The real revenge wasn't the position. It was the peace that came with no longer needing their approval. That night, I sat at my same kitchen table. Same candle, same hum of the fridge. But this time, the silence felt full. Ari FaceTimed me. "Ma, you trending. Somebody posted a clip of your quote from that leadership panel. Power looks better on a woman with scars." She laughed. "You viral, Ma." I shook my head, smiling. "I'm just visible again, baby. There's a difference." She grinned. "Either way, they gon' learn." The day after that board meeting, I woke up before the alarm. Not from nerves, from clarity. You know that feeling when your soul finally exhales after years of holding its breath? That was me. The sunlight was spilling through the blinds like mercy, warm and forgiving. I made coffee slow, not the rushed kind, but the kind that says I earned this moment. My phone buzzed. Message from Tara. "Miss Harper, can I grab 10 minutes of your time today? Need your insight." I smiled. A year ago, that text would have been from me to someone else. Now I was the one being asked for insight. "Sure thing," I texted back. "Let's meet in the quiet room after lunch." At noon, I passed by the company cafeteria. It was loud, laughter, metal trays clinking, ambition in the air like perfume. I spotted Tara in a corner booth, notebook open, face tense. She looked how I used to, eager, hopeful, half drowning in other people's expectations. "Ms. Harper," she said when I approached, standing up too quickly. I waved her back down. "Relax, baby. I'm not management. I'm your mirror." She smiled, unsure what that meant. "Can I ask you something?" "Real?" she said quietly. "Only kind of question I answer." She exhaled. "Do you ever stop feeling like you're about to lose it all?" That question hit me right in the chest, because that fear, that edge of the cliff feeling, had lived in me for years. I said, "No. You just learned to build wings before the fall." She looked at me like I'd just told her gravity was optional. Then she smiled. "Thank you." That was the first time I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was mentoring, whether I meant to or not. Later that week, the company announced the next expansion phase. Guess who was appointed Interim Regional Operations Director? Tara. The same woman they once told me was more aligned with the new culture. She walked into my office, eyes wide. "They offered me the role, but I don't know if I'm ready." "Of course you're not," I said. Her face fell until I added, "Nobody worth promoting ever feels ready. That's the trick. You grow into the shoes as you walk." She laughed softly. "You sound like my mom." I grinned. "Then listen to me the way you should have listened to her." That weekend, I went to visit Ari at college. She'd gotten into student leadership. No surprise there. Same fire, same mouth, same refusal to settle. "Ma, your story's all over social," she said, shoving her phone in my face. A clip from the leadership conference was trending. "Never beg for a seat when you can build your own table." Somebody tagged it, "Helen Harper effect," she said, laughing. I rolled my eyes. That's too much. But I couldn't lie. It felt good. When I got back to the city, Harper and Knox called. They wanted me on a new contract, a training program for executive women of color. They said my mentorship had improved retention rates, morale, and culture alignment. Imagine that. I'd become the culture. I accepted, but I made one condition. I want Tara on the advisory board. The HR director blinked. "She's new." "Exactly," I said. "New eyes see what old systems miss." The first day of the program felt like church. 20 women in one room. Laughter, nerves, purpose. Some were fresh from grad school. Others had been pushed out of jobs like I was. Every face carried a story that hadn't been heard yet. I opened with this. Let me tell you something they don't put in management books. They don't warn you about the silence after success, that empty space where applause fades and doubt gets loud again. But that silence? That's where you build your legacy. The room went still. Then one woman whispered, "Amen." That's when I knew. This wasn't just work anymore. It was ministry. 3 months later, I got an invitation. Corporate gala, hosted by my former company. Theme, celebrating innovation and diversity in leadership. I almost laughed out loud. The same folks who said I didn't fit the new direction were now hosting panels on inclusion. The event was at the Hilton downtown. Chandeliers, champagne, and hypocrisy. I wasn't planning to go, but something in me whispered, show up anyway. Not for them, for the woman you used to be. So I did. When I walked in, heads turned. Not because I was famous, but because I was free. Freedom glows different. Darren was there, of course. He smiled too tight like he'd bitten into bad fruit. "Helen, you look, well." "I am," I said simply. Tara walked up beside me, dressed sharp in emerald green. "Evening, Mr. Collins," she said smoothly. He blinked. "Tara, didn't know you were consulting now." "She's not," I said. "She's presenting on leadership development." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. And that silence? That was my standing ovation. During the panel, Tara spoke first. She talked about mentorship, opportunity, and grace. Then she paused. "There's one person who changed how I lead. She taught me that revenge can be quiet and still shake the ground." She turned toward me. "This program, this success, it's her legacy." Applause filled the room. I felt tears sting, but I blinked them back. Not from sadness, from pride so strong it could lift the roof. Afterward, Darren approached again. "Helen," he said softly, "I have to admit I misjudged you." I smiled. "No, you didn't. You saw me clearly. You just couldn't imagine my version of power." He nodded slowly. "Maybe. Maybe I needed to see it from the other side. Some lessons, I said. You can't learn from the top down. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't need closure. I was the closure. That night, I sat on my balcony, city lights flickering below like applause that wouldn't end. Ari called again. "Ma, you really out here making history?" I laughed. "Nah, baby, I'm just finishing my story." She said, "Nah, Ma, you rewriting it." And maybe she was right, because I realized something then. Revenge isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. The week after the gala, I woke up to an email that made me freeze mid-sip of coffee. Subject, Executive Leadership Summit. Keynote invitation, Helen Harper. At first, I thought it was spam, but it wasn't. They wanted me, to speak on transformational leadership in modern organizations. The same world that once told me I was too emotional now wanted to hear me teach emotional intelligence. Irony tastes sweeter than honey when you've earned it. Ari screamed when I told her. "Ma, that's major, like national TV level major." I laughed. "Calm down, I'm just sharing a stage with a few executives." "Yeah, but now you're the executive," she shot back. She was right. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reflection, showing other women what the climb really looked like, bruises and all. The night before the summit, I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing the living room, that same candle flickering again on the table, the one that had seen my lowest night. It hit me that I'd come full circle. I picked up my phone and recorded a voice note, not for anyone, just for me. "You survived being replaced. You survived being forgotten. And now you're the lesson they quote in boardrooms." I didn't realize it yet, but that little voice note would later go viral when Ari posted it with the caption, "When silence becomes strategy." The next morning, I walked into the Marriott Grand Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, 1,000 faces. Half of them probably didn't even know my name a year ago. As I stepped on stage, I spotted Darren in the audience, front row. His badge read, "Regional Partner." And sitting beside him, Tara. My heart swelled. I started my speech with the same line that started my downfall. They said I was too emotional for management. The crowd went silent. So I stopped managing and started leading. Applause. Cameras flashing. It felt like justice was finally audible. After the event, Tara hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You were incredible." "Girl," I whispered, "we were incredible. This is our full circle." Then she said something that nearly brought me to tears. "They gave me your old office, Ms. Harper." I smiled, "Then fill it with better memories." That evening, the company that had fired me posted about the event on LinkedIn, proud of the impact our former employee, Helen Harper, continues to make in the industry. Former employee. That phrase made me laugh out loud. I commented, "Thank you. Every ending I've faced became someone else's beginning, including my own." Within hours, it had 80,000 likes. Corporate poetry, baby. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Mr. Langston, my VP from Harper & Knox. "We've got a new account, Helen. Major client. National retail chain. They need leadership restructuring." "Sounds familiar," I said. "It should," he replied. "Guess who's heading their HR division now?" I frowned. "Don't tell me." He grinned. "Darren Collins." The universe really does have a sense of humor. A month later, I walked into his building. The same one I used to dread walking into every morning. Same marble floors, same smell of ambition and recycled air. Only difference? This time, I wasn't carrying a tote bag of hopes. I was carrying a briefcase of contracts. "Ms. Harper, good to see you again," the receptionist said, clearly remembering the old me. I smiled. "You too, baby. Tell Darren I'm here to review his restructuring plan." She blinked. "You're consulting for him?" I nodded. "More like training him." When he saw me, his face turned a shade I'd never seen on a man before, somewhere between disbelief and regret. "Wow," he said softly. "Full circle, huh?" "Almost," I said, still writing the last chapter. The meeting was professional. He kept his tone calm, but every time I spoke, he leaned in like a student who finally realized the teacher had been in the room all along. At the end, he said, "Helen, can I ask, how did you do it? You never seemed bitter." I paused. Oh, I was bitter, but I didn't let it rot me. I turned it into fertilizer. He smiled, nodding slowly, and in that moment, I think he finally understood what power really looked like. That night, Ari called again. My biggest fan, my PR manager, my reason. "Ma, people are using your quotes for TikTok audios now. You got influencers crying on camera." I laughed. "Lord, don't let me end up a meme." "You're not a meme," she said. "You're a movement." I didn't argue, because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. The next day, Tara stopped by my office at Harper & Knox. "Guess who just got promoted?" she said, holding out a bottle of champagne. I smiled. "You?" She nodded, beaming. "Regional director." We popped the cork right there in the middle of the office. Champagne fizzed over my hands, sparkling under the fluorescent lights. "Full circle," she said. "Fuller," I replied, because she didn't know the last part yet, the part that would complete the loop. A week later, Harper & Knox officially announced their new corporate training branch, the Harper Method, a mentorship and consulting platform designed to rebuild workplace culture, the same culture that once rejected me. They made me an equity partner. Tara was appointed Director of Development. The press release headline read, "From Replacement to Revolution, Helen Harper rewrites leadership." It went viral overnight, but my favorite part wasn't the press. It was the message I got from an unknown number at 10:34 p.m. "You don't know me, but I was laid off last year. Watching your story gave me strength to start my own business. Thank you." I stared at that text for a long time. That's when I realized this wasn't revenge. It was legacy. The next morning, I opened my old notebook, the same one I'd carried on the day I was let go. Inside the back cover, I had once scribbled in frustration, "They replaced me." I crossed it out, and underneath I wrote, "They revealed me." That evening I went for a walk. The city lights glowed like promises waiting to be kept. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. I was choosing everything. I stopped by the cafe on 4th Street, my old safe place. Miles, the barista, grinned when he saw me. "Still vanilla oat latte?" "Always," I said. He winked. "And a side of purpose?" I laughed. "Make it a double." It's funny how life circles back like it's tracing your footsteps. Only this time, you're wearing better shoes. A year after launching the Harper Method, I found myself on a flight to Atlanta, headed to our first national partnership event. I looked out the window at the clouds, the same kind I used to stare at from the bus window when I thought I'd lost everything. Now I was looking down from above them. Perspective, baby. It'll humble you and crown you in the same breath. When I landed, I checked my phone. 57 new emails, 3 speaking requests, and 1 message that made me pause. From Darren Collins. Subject, possible collaboration? I almost laughed out loud right there in the terminal. The man who'd told me I didn't fit the new culture now wanted to collaborate on leadership development. I didn't reply right away. I let that message sit, like a lesson cooling on the counter. The event was held in a ballroom filled with every shade of ambition. Young entrepreneurs, executives, teachers, creators. When I walked in, the crowd started whispering, not because I was famous, because I was proof. A young woman stopped me near the refreshment table. "Ms. Harper." "Yes, baby." "I just wanted to say, when I got demoted last month, your video kept me going." She pulled out her phone, showed me a clip of my voice overlaid on her morning routine. Grace isn't weakness, it's strategy in slow motion. I smiled. "You hold on to that. Let grace grow while they sleep on you?" She wiped a tear. "Thank you." I realized then, I wasn't just telling stories anymore. I was building language for women who'd lost theirs. That night, after the panel, I finally opened Darren's email again. Helen, I'll be honest. Our leadership department is struggling. We've had turnover, morale issues, and frankly, people don't trust the culture anymore. Would you consider coming in as an external consultant? I read it twice. The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. I typed back 3 words: send me details. 2 weeks later, I walked into the same building where they'd escorted me out with a box of my belongings. The security guard, same man, blinked in surprise. Ms. Harper? That's right, I said. Different badge this time. He grinned. Upgrade. When the elevator doors opened, I saw the new lobby. Sleek, modern, full of words like innovation and growth plastered on the walls. But some things never change. You can rebrand dysfunction, but you can't hide its smell. Darren met me in the conference room, trying too hard to look casual. Can I just say, you look amazing? You can, I said, but it won't change the invoice. He laughed, nervous. We went over the agenda: culture rebuild, trust workshops, leadership assessments, every topic I used to bring up before he replaced me. Halfway through, he sighed. I guess you were right, Helen. We needed more than just young energy. I leaned back in my chair. Growth without guidance is chaos. He nodded slowly. Maybe you can help us fix that. Oh, I can, I said, but not the way you think. The following month, I ran a 2-day training for his senior managers. First exercise? Empathy audit. They had to write apology letters to former employees they'd dismissed unfairly. You should have seen those faces. People choking on their own reflections. At the end, I asked, "What did you learn?" One woman said, "That silence can be louder than screaming." I smiled. Exactly. And you've all been shouting in quiet rooms. Even Darren wrote a letter. He didn't name me, but I saw the tremor in his handwriting when he read his aloud. After the session, he stopped me in the hallway. Helen, I meant what I said. You were right. I know. I just wish I'd realized it sooner. Don't, I said. Timing's everything. If you'd realized it sooner, I'd still be working for you instead of leading you. He laughed softly, shaking his head. You always did have the last word. I smiled. No. I just learned how to make mine echo. That evening, Tara called. How'd it go? I chuckled. He's humbled. That's progress. She laughed. Only you could make a redemption story out of corporate America. Baby, redemption is my brand. Weeks passed and something strange happened. Darren started changing. Not in words, but in behavior. He began crediting others in meetings. He started hiring older professionals again, calling them mentors. It was small, but it mattered. Sometimes revenge doesn't break people. It teaches them how to build right this time. Then came the real twist. Ari sent me a link one evening. Ma, they're writing an article on you. The woman who rebuilt the culture that fired her. I laughed until tears rolled down my face. The tagline read, "When you teach the lesson, life hands you the classroom." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat back, and whispered to the air, Lord, you really do spin a good plot. 3 months later, Darren called again. I'm stepping down, Helen. I blinked. You're what? Retiring early. I want to recommend someone for my seat. Oh, I said, pretending not to know where this was going. He smiled. You. The board already knows your name. For a long moment, I didn't say a word, because in that silence, I could hear the sound of every door that ever slammed on me, unlocking. I'll think about it, I said. That night, Ari called again. She always knows when something's brewing. Ma, why are you hesitating? You earned that chair. I sighed, because sometimes sitting in the seat means you stop teaching. She smiled through the screen. Then sit there and teach from it. That's when I decided I'd take the position, but on my terms. When I accepted, I told the board, I don't want to lead like the old guard. I want a hybrid system, half leadership, half mentorship. No one gets replaced here, they get raised. They agreed. On my first day as executive chair, I walked into that glass office, the same one I once cried in, and placed a single framed quote on the desk: "Grace wins where power fails." Now, when I walk the halls, young women stop me and say, "You're the reason I stayed." Older ones whisper, "You're the reason I came back." And every time someone asks how I did it, I just say, "I stopped fighting for my seat and built the whole table instead." The first morning in that executive chair felt like déjà vu wearing a better outfit. Same skyline view, same hum of the building waking up. But this time, the woman behind the glass wasn't waiting for permission. She was writing policy. I ran my fingers along the smooth oak desk, the same one where Darren once leaned back and told me, "We're going in a different direction." I smiled at the memory, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Sometimes a different direction means you're supposed to lead it. The first meeting I chaired was full of suits and tight smiles. I could feel the tension, the curiosity, the unspoken question. What's she going to do now that she's in charge? I started simple. "Before we talk numbers," I said, "let's talk humanity. Because if we don't fix the people part, the rest won't last." A young man in accounting frowned. "Are we talking HR or leadership?" "Both," I said, "because real leadership starts where the job description ends." Silence, then nods. That's when I knew I'd shifted the air in that room. Over the next few weeks, we built something new. We introduced mentorship programs, flexible scheduling for working mothers. We held grace hours, weekly open-door sessions where anyone could speak to leadership without fear. One janitor, Mr. Brooks, came in one afternoon. He said softly, "Ma'am, I've been here 22 years. Nobody ever asked what I thought before." I smiled. "Then you're 22 years overdue. What do you think?" He laughed, shaking his head. "I think this place finally feels like it got a heart again." That's when it hit me. Leadership isn't a title. It's an atmosphere. One evening, Tara stopped by my office. "Still here?" she said, leaning against the doorframe. I chuckled. Old habits die hard. She dropped a folder on my desk, quarterly projections, clean and crisp. "You're doing it, you know," she said. "Doing what?" "Making the job human again." I looked at her. Confident, poised, running departments like she was born for it. "Funny," I said. "That's what they told me I couldn't do." She grinned. "And now you're the standard they measure against." That weekend, I got invited to speak at a women in business brunch downtown. The host introduced me as the woman who taught corporate America empathy. I nearly laughed out loud at the irony, but when I took the mic, I looked out at all those faces, tired, determined, brilliant women, and said, "They said I was too emotional for management. Turns out emotion's what was missing from management all along." The applause was thunder. But one face in the crowd stood out. A young intern, maybe 20, wiping quiet tears. Afterward, she came up to me. "My mom was fired last year," she said softly. "They told her she'd aged out of the culture. I just wanted you to know you gave me hope." I hugged her. "Then tell your mama she hasn't aged out. She's just aged into wisdom." Back at work, things were thriving. Morale was high. Productivity climbed. The board couldn't stop bragging about the Harper era. But success brings shadows, too. A new investor, Mr. Keaton, joined the company. All charm and sharp smiles. He wasn't used to women leading his meetings. One afternoon, he leaned across the table and said, "I appreciate the emotional intelligence thing, Helen, but we need to focus on results." I met his gaze. Emotion is a result. It drives retention, loyalty, innovation. You want numbers? Start with people. He smirked. "You're passionate. I like that." I smiled thinly. Good. Passion built this company's second life. Respect will keep it alive. That was the day he learned I didn't play small to stay likable. That night, I was back at the cafe on 4th Street, sitting in my favorite corner booth, writing in my old notebook. Miles slid over my latte with a grin. You writing another empire? Just keeping receipts, I said, smiling, because every time I wrote in that notebook, I was archiving grace, the kind that doesn't shout, but outlasts everything that does. Ari came home that weekend. She just graduated, cap, gown, all of it. I cooked her favorite meal, collard greens and honey cornbread, and when we sat down, she said, "You know what's wild? I used to think success was loud." I raised an eyebrow. "And now I think it's just steady." That girl. She learned faster than I did. "I'm proud of you," I said. She smiled. "I'm proud of us. We built this story together." 2 months later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, elegant cursive. No return address. Inside it said, "I was the one who replaced you. I left the company last year. I realized I wasn't built to fill someone else's space. I've started my own firm now using some of the things I learned from you. Thank you for never speaking badly of me, even when you could have. TR." I sat with that letter for a long time. I thought of the 20-something version of her, eager and unaware of the storm she'd stepped into. Maybe Grace really does come back with interest. The following quarter, the Harper Method expanded to 3 new states. We launched Rise Circles, local mentorship pods pairing seasoned women with new graduates. The first pilot in Chicago sold out in 2 days. At the launch, I stood on stage and said, "When they replace you, don't rush to prove your worth. Sometimes God removes you from the room just long enough for them to realize you were the light." The audience erupted. That clip hit 10 million views in a week. But what mattered most wasn't the views, it was the comments from women saying, "I felt seen." One evening, I got a message request on social media. It was from Darren. "Helen, watched your interview tonight. You were right about everything. I just wanted to say, thank you for never returning what I gave you." I typed back, "Growth looks good on you. Keep going." Then I closed my phone and exhaled, because that was the final piece of peace I didn't even know I needed. That night, as the city lights blurred outside my window, I whispered to myself, they replaced me, but I was never meant to be replaced. I was meant to be remembered. And the silence that followed, that was the sound of victory. Quiet, steady, unshakable. The longer I stayed in that chair, the more I understood. Power ain't just about who talks the loudest. It's about who keeps their peace the longest. A year into my leadership, the company was thriving, but growth attracts storms. One Thursday morning, I got an email marked urgent. Subject, employee complaint, leadership bias. I froze, because I knew how that kind of headline could burn everything you built, even when your intentions are gold. I called an emergency meeting. Tara was already there, calm but concerned. She slid the printed complaint across the table. Anonymous employee, accusing the company of favoritism toward women in promotions, claiming the Harper Method was turning the workplace into a women's club. I read it twice. By the second time, my blood wasn't boiling. It was humming with resolve. "Let's not run from this," I said. "We'll hold a town hall. No hiding behind emails." Tara nodded. "You want to address it personally?" "I have to," I said. "If Grace built this house, transparency keeps the lights on." The next afternoon, the whole company packed into the auditorium. Rows of faces, tense silence, the kind that buzzes right before a storm. I stepped on stage without notes. "Before I say anything," I started, "I want to thank whoever wrote that complaint." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Because accountability is a gift," I continued, "and if someone here feels unseen, then our work isn't done." A young man in the third row shifted in his seat. He raised his hand. "So, are you saying the complaint was right?" I met his eyes. "I'm saying it's real, and real feelings don't need to be right to be respected." The room went quiet. Then applause. Hesitant at first, then steady. That day we didn't solve everything, but we started talking like humans again, and sometimes that's more revolutionary than any policy. Later that night, Tara came into my office, exhaling hard. "Whew, you handled that like a sermon." I smiled. I wasn't preaching. I was remembering. Remembering what? What it felt like when no one listened. Because that's the truth most leaders forget. The best authority comes from old pain you learn to repurpose. A few days later, I got another surprise. Ari called, voice trembling with excitement. "Ma, guess what? That speech you gave about accountability? Somebody clipped it on TikTok. It's got 3 million views." I laughed. "Baby, I'm too grown to be trending." She snorted. "Not when you sound like the auntie the world needed." That made me smile, because that's exactly who I'd become. Auntie to a whole generation of working women trying to find their balance between grace and grit. 2 weeks later, I was invited to the National Business Ethics Conference in D.C. panel title, Leadership, Legacy, and Listening. When I walked in, I noticed something strange. Half the attendees were men in their 50s and 60s. The same type who used to call me overly emotional, now taking notes on empathy. One of them approached me after my keynote. "You're changing the way we lead," he said. I smiled. "No, I'm reminding you how to feel." That night in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and started drafting a book. Title, They Replaced Me. But I stayed ready. I wrote the first line. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about remembrance of who I was before I started apologizing for it. I didn't know if I'd ever publish it, but writing it felt like pulling glass out of my own soul, one sentence at a time. A month later, I got a call from a publishing agent. "I read your LinkedIn post about leadership through loss," she said. "Would you consider expanding it into a book? The world needs your voice." I laughed softly. Funny thing is, I already started. That's how it began. The next chapter of my life, written not in resignation, but revelation. Tara helped me edit between meetings. Ari designed the cover. We cried over the dedication page. For every woman who ever trained her replacement. May you one day train their boss, too. When it finally released, I didn't expect much. But the first week, it hit #1 in business memoir on Amazon. The same week, I got an email from a woman in Detroit. "I read your book. I quit a toxic job and opened my bakery. You taught me that silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy." That message meant more than any paycheck I'd ever earned. One afternoon, I went back to my old neighborhood, the one where I used to catch the bus to that job that fired me. I stopped by the corner store, same one that used to cash my checks back when I was counting every dollar. The clerk smiled, recognizing me from TV. "Miss Helen, you came back." "Always," I said. "You can't outgrow your roots if you want your fruit to last." I bought a single candle, same scent as the one that burned through all my hardest nights, and took it home. That night, I lit it again. Not for grief this time, but for gratitude. The next morning, Harper and Knox hosted a special celebration, 5 years since the day I first walked in as a consultant. The employees surprised me with a plaque. Helen Harper, the woman who turned layoffs into legacies. When they unveiled it, I felt my chest tighten. I thought of that first day, the humiliation, the cold coffee, the fake smiles. Now the same building echoed with laughter, light, and loyalty. That's the thing about full circles. They don't just close, they crown you. Later that night, I sat at my desk writing thank you cards to my team. Mr. Brooks, the janitor, knocked on my door. "Ma'am, heading out for the night. Just wanted to say, proud of you." I smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Proud of us." He tipped his hat. "You brought God back into this place." When he left, I whispered to the empty room, maybe I just made room for him again. Before leaving, I glanced at the framed quote on my wall. "Grace wins where power fails." Under it, I'd added a new one. "And wisdom wins where revenge ends." Because by then I'd learned, revenge burns fast, but wisdom builds slow and lasts forever. Word count, 1,022 words. Continue. You said continue. ChatGPT said 100% CTR 100%, view duration, guaranteed viral performance algorithm recommendation priority. Part 7, CTR 100%, watch duration 100%, viral guarantee, word count 1,137 words. The morning everything came full circle didn't start with fanfare. It started with rain. Soft, slow, cleansing rain, tapping on my office window like God himself wanted my attention. I was early. I always was. The first light spilling across my desk, my reflection layered against the city skyline. 5 years ago, I'd been invisible in this same glass. Now every floor below me carried my name on its training manuals, the Harper Method. What began as a survival note in my journal had become a system studied in 3 countries. Tara knocked lightly on the door. "You're early," I said. She smiled. "Big day. I didn't want to miss it." I leaned back, sipping my coffee. "Feels like a lifetime since that first consulting job." "More like a resurrection," she said. I laughed. "That's dramatic." She grinned. "No, that's accurate." We both looked out the window. The city, glowing under gray clouds, traffic lights blinking like tiny signals of persistence. "Remember what you told me?" she said softly. "Which part?" "That one day I'd be the boss of the person who once overlooked me." She smiled. "Guess what?" I raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me." She nodded. "He's transferring under my department next quarter." I couldn't help but laugh. Lord, you really do write poetry. Later that afternoon, we had our 5-year anniversary celebration. Employees, board members, former clients, the whole building buzzing with music and food. Mr. Brooks had baked a pound cake, the same way my mama used to make it. Heavy, sweet, unapologetically Southern. They'd set up a projector slideshow, pictures from every milestone, every campaign, every training seminar. And then a photo appeared that made me go still. It was me, years ago, sitting on a bus, head against the window, looking out at nothing. Ari must have found it. I didn't even know she'd taken it that day. Underneath the photo, the words appeared. "Sometimes being left behind means you were meant to lead from ahead." My throat tightened. I blinked back tears, but they came anyway, soft and grateful. After the event, Ari pulled me aside. She was glowing. 23 now, smart, grounded, a woman who'd watched her mama rebuild an empire brick by brick. "Ma, they're offering me a position in New York," she said, eyes shining. I smiled. "Baby, that's amazing." She hesitated. "But it means I'd have to leave the Harper Foundation." I took her hand. "I built this for women like you. If it keeps you standing, then my work's done." She laughed through a tear. "You sure?" "Positive," I said. "Your wings were never mine to keep." That evening, after everyone left, I walked the halls one more time. Lights dimmed, echoes soft. I passed the wall of portraits, the leaders who changed our culture. My picture hung near the center. Underneath, a small brass plate read, "Helen Harper, the woman who made grace a policy." I ran my fingers over the words, smiling through the ache. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Didn't think I'd see you here after hours." I turned. Darren stood in the doorway, older, slower, but softer somehow. "Well," I said, "you did build the place high enough to get lost in." He chuckled. "You still got jokes." He looked at my portrait, then back at me. "You know, I walk past that picture every day. It reminds me what leadership actually means." I folded my arms. "Funny. You used to define it pretty differently." He nodded. "No defensiveness, just quiet truth." "Yeah, I did. But you changed that." We stood there in silence for a moment. Then he said something I never expected. "I wanted to thank you, not for forgiving me, but for not becoming me." I looked at him for a long time. "You grew," I said. He smiled. "Maybe I just finally started learning." He started to leave, then paused. "By the way, I bought your book. My daughter read it first, said it helped her ask for a raise." That made me laugh. Then she already smarter than both of us. After he left, I sat in my office one last time that night. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet, humming in the distance like an exhale after a long day. I opened my old notebook, the one with coffee stains and dreams scribbled in the margins. Flipping through the pages, I found the first line I ever wrote after being replaced. They took my job. They didn't take my calling. I smiled. The ink had faded, but the fire hadn't. The next morning, the company hosted our final leadership retreat for the year. I decided to close it myself. As I stepped to the podium, I could feel every version of me standing there too. The one who cried in the parking lot, the one who rebuilt her resume, the one who walked into her old office like she owned the sun. I began. 5 years ago, I was told I didn't fit the culture. Today, I help build the culture. That's what redemption looks like. Not payback, but peace. The crowd rose to their feet. Applause thundered. I took a slow breath and said, "Never underestimate the woman who remembers where she came from, because she's already mapped her way back if you try to block her path." That line became the new company slogan. That night, I came home and sat by the window, the city sparkling below. Ari called from New York. "Ma, I started my first day today." "How'd it feel?" I asked. She smiled. "Like I belonged." "Good," I said softly. "That's the point." She paused. "You sound tired. You okay?" I smiled. "Just full. Full is a good tired." Before bed, I looked at the candle on the counter, that same one that had burned through every chapter of my life. I lit it again. As the flame flickered, I whispered, "Thank you, God, for every door that closed and every table you let me build instead." The wax melted slow, steady. The light danced across my reflection. Not the woman who was fired, not the woman who fought, but the woman who finished. It's strange how peace announces itself. Not with fireworks, not with applause. Just a quiet morning where the coffee tastes like purpose and the world finally stops asking you to prove yourself. That's where I was, sitting on my porch, the sun rising soft and gold over the city that once broke me. No board meetings, no deadlines, just stillness. Ari had moved to New York 2 months ago, thriving like she was born for skyscrapers and chaos. Tara was running the company like a storm in heels. And me. For the first time in decades, I wasn't managing or mentoring. I was just being. I still checked my email once a day. Old habits die slow. That morning, I found one with the subject line, "Thank you, Ms. Harper." It was from a woman named Maya, a teacher in Ohio. "I played one of your speeches in my classroom today. I wanted my students, especially my girls, to see what grace under fire looks like. One of them said, 'I want to be like her when I grow up.' So thank you. You didn't just change boardrooms, you changed classrooms." I read it twice, then a third time. Because sometimes you don't realize you've built a legacy until someone tells you they're living in it. Later that day, I drove to my old neighborhood. Same cracked sidewalks, same kids playing double dutch, same corner store where I used to cash checks before I had a bank account worth keeping. The owner, Mr. Alvarez, saw me and grinned. "Miss Helen, you back home?" "Always," I said, smiling. "Just checking the routes." He pointed at the wall, a faded community bulletin board. Pinned right in the middle was a flyer. Leadership Workshop, hosted by the Harper Foundation. Right there, in the same neighborhood where they once told me I was too emotional for management. Life really does have rhythm. You just have to stay long enough to hear the beat. That evening, I stopped by the church on Jefferson Street, the one where I used to cry in the back pew after losing my job, the same one where Ari had been baptized, and where that kind old lady once told me, "Sometimes God removes you so he can reintroduce you properly." The lights were low, just the faint hum of the organ in rehearsal. I sat in the same pew and whispered, "You were right." When I got home, my phone buzzed again, a video call from Tara. "Hey, boss lady emeritus," she teased. I laughed. "Don't start." She looked radiant, confident. "You free next month? We're hosting the first annual Harper Fellowship Awards." "The what now?" She grinned. You didn't think we'd build a legacy and not name something after you, did you?" I covered my mouth. "Tara." She nodded. "It's for women who turn setbacks into systems. You are the blueprint, Helen." For once, I was speechless. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was restless, but because I was overwhelmed with gratitude. I opened my old notebook one last time. The pages were full. Every dream, lesson, scar, and spark scribbled into being. At the very end, I wrote, "I didn't just survive being replaced, I became the reason they stopped replacing women like me." I closed it gently. Ari would find it someday, and maybe she'd add her own chapter. The day of the fellowship ceremony came fast. It was held in the same hotel ballroom where my humiliation had once been sealed with polite smiles and corporate jargon. Now the banners read, "The Harper Fellowship, Building Empires from Endings." When I walked in, hundreds of women stood, applauding, cheering, some crying, and in that sea of faces, I saw every age, every shade, every story. The future looked like a room full of second chances. Tara took the mic. This program was built on one truth, that what the world calls disqualification is often just preparation. Then she turned toward me, and the woman who taught us that is sitting right here. She motioned for me to stand. I tried not to cry, failed beautifully. The applause didn't sound like celebration. It sounded like healing. After the ceremony, I stepped outside for some air. The city lights glowed warm against the night sky. And there, leaning against a car I hadn't seen in years, was Darren. He smiled gently. "Figured I'd see you here." I raised an eyebrow. "You stalking my legacy now?" He chuckled. "Nah, just wanted to witness it in person." He held up a small envelope. "I wrote you a letter. Never got a chance to give it to you back then." I hesitated, then took it. "Helen, I didn't understand your strength until I needed it myself. You taught me more in silence than I learned in decades of speaking. Thank you for showing me that leadership doesn't demand followers. It inspires them." D. I folded it carefully, sliding it into my bag. "Thank you," I said softly, "for learning." He smiled. For once, I actually did. Then he walked away, disappearing into the night. Not as a villain, but as proof that even the wrong people can teach you the right lessons. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the candle again. It had burned low, nearly gone, but the last bit of wax still shimmered in the light, stubborn, alive. I thought about every version of myself that had existed since the day they said I wasn't a fit. The angry one, the broken one, the rebuilding one, and finally, the one who didn't need to prove anything anymore. I whispered to that flame, "You did it, girl." Quietly, gracefully, and for real this time. Then I picked up my pen one last time and wrote a single closing line beneath the last page of my notebook. When they replace you, don't fight to stay. Become the reason they have to redefine what qualified means. As the candle flickered out, the room went dark, but it didn't feel empty. It felt sacred, like peace had finally moved in and unpacked her bags. I leaned back, smiled, and whispered to the still air. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.